Memorial to the man whose name many recognize but whose exploits few know. Of Buffalo's Wild Bill Donovan. Born in Buffalo, the son of Irish immigrants, he rose on the world stage as a World War I hero, international lawyer, and father of the Central Intelligence Agency.
We shall have to match Germany's military and sea power if we wish to maintain our way of life.
William Donovan, one of 10 children, was born in 1883 at the foot of Michigan Street in Buffalo's Old First Ward in the shadow of grain elevators and railroad yards. But hard work and a touch of Irish luck were on the side of the Donovans when they eventually made their way out of the First Ward. And Bill, athletic, with a captivating personality and penetrating blue eyes, never looked back. A family friend, who later became Bishop of Buffalo, helped him to get into private schools where he eventually made his way into Niagara University. From there, a priest recommended him to Columbia Law School. He graduated in 1908 and went to work for one of the largest law firms in Buffalo. Donovan's law career had put him into a circle far removed from his roots in the First Ward. By 1912, he was part of Buffalo's privileged society. That year, he and 41 other Buffalo elite formed a cavalry regiment of the New York National Guard. They became known as the Silk Stocking Boys when at the time the cavalry was seen by most as more of a social organization than military. But for Donovan, it was serious business, and his charm, mixed with his hard driving and often overzealous personality, took him to the front of the ranks. The boy from the wrong side of the tracks had his first taste of the military, and he liked it. From then on, everything else came second. In 1914, he married Ruth Rumsey, a debutante from Buffalo's cream of society, and planted himself even deeper into elite Buffalo circles. Now seen as a rising star in the East Coast establishment, the Rockefeller Foundation sent him to assist Herbert Hoover with humanitarian efforts in war-torn regions of Central Europe. It was 1916, and a turning point in Donovan's life. Donovan's business in Europe was cut short, though, when the Silk Stocking Boys were called to duty to hunt for Pancho Villa, the Mexican revolutionary. After 6 months in Europe, a brief stop home, and 6 months on the Texas border, Donovan finally returned to his new bride back in Buffalo. But just 3 days later, and with Ruth ready to give birth, he received orders to report to New York City, where he was named colonel of the famous Fighting 69th. America had entered World War I, and Donovan was off once again.
The only person in the history of this country to get the 4 highest medals that this country offers.
In 1918, the 35-year-old Donovan had made a grand entrance into the national spotlight and returned to Buffalo as one of the most decorated officers of World War I. But pain accompanied glory. Through tears, he told his brother Vincent, "When I think of all the boys I've left behind me who died out of loyalty to me, it's too much." Donovan, once again working as an attorney, promised Ruth that he was home for good, but the promise rang hollow. After he was retained by the largest banking firm in the nation, the House of Morgan, he spent a year in Europe and Russia conducting private financial negotiations. In 1922, during Prohibition, he accepted an offer from President Harding to become the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of New York, which included Buffalo, a wealthy city, an industrial city, and a first-class drinking town. Donovan would have his hands full. The raids in 1924 alienated Donovan in his hometown and among the city's privileged class. A year later, he accepted President Coolidge's offer as Assistant Attorney General and moved to Washington, D.C. Within 4 years, he was offered the vice presidency by Herbert Hoover. Considering it a do-nothing position and anticipating being named Attorney General, he declined. In 1932, he was ready to take another stab at politics and was back in Buffalo to kick off his campaign for governor of New York at the Broadway Auditorium, a move that many considered a stepping stone to the presidency. But he was stunned, losing even in his hometown, where the memory of his Prohibition betrayals lingered. The coming years saw the world thrown into chaos as Nazi Germany advanced across Europe. Donovan, who had returned to private practice in his Wall Street law firm, couldn't stay away. By 1940, Germany had gained a major foothold in Europe, and England was preparing for certain invasion.
We have announced to the world, as well as to Germany, that we intend to support England. The plain fact is that if Hitler wins, our trade, our standard of living, our concept of human life would all be placed in jeopardy.
That year, President Roosevelt sent Donovan to London on a twofold mission: to assess England's chances of victory under German attack and to learn more about the workings of the British intelligence network. Working closely with William Stevenson, a British spy known as Intrepid, Donovan convinced Roosevelt of the need for a centralized U.S. intelligence system. And in June 1941, the Office of Coordinator of Information, the COI, was formed. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the COI became the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. The American intelligence system had come of age. Donovan retained his position as director. The coming of peace in 1945 brought the demise of the Office of Strategic Services. Donovan struggled to keep the OSS together, but Harry Truman, now in the White House, would have no part of it. Truman gave Donovan 10 days to clean out the OSS offices. But within months of returning to private law practice, he was contacted by another Western New York native who was leading the prosecution of Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg.
And Robert H. Jackson, another local boy from Jamestown, he was a Supreme Court justice.
That's right. Jackson was asked to step down from the Supreme Court and go over there and head up the prosecution. He agreed to do this. He had two people, his son and another guy. So he had dinner with Donovan, and he realized immediately how much help Donovan could be. Donovan joined him, but he had a real tough time being anybody's second banana. So he goes as his special assistant, as Jackson's special assistant. They go over, and while Jackson is in England trying to get the ground rules straight, Donovan interviews Hermann Göring.
It's amazing. Two guys from Western New York working on such an enormous thing.
He talks to Göring. Göring says, I'll testify against 5 or 6 Nazis. All I want is not to be hung. You give me a firing squad. Donovan's response was, dead is dead. And he said, if that's what you want, we can do that, if that's what it takes to flip you. Well, it turned out that the people who were very close to Jackson said, he had no right to be doing that, and they didn't like that. Jackson, who was a careful lawyer, said we have enough books and records and information to do this. Donovan, who was a theatrical trial lawyer, said, my God, nothing that we have can come near what we can accomplish by putting a live person on to talk about these other folks. And Jackson simply didn't want to do business with that kind of person.
The difference of opinion between the two men created a chasm that couldn't be crossed. Jackson, careful and deliberate, didn't back down, and Donovan, proud and opinionated, resigned from the prosecution. But not from the idea of an intelligence agency to replace the defunct OSS, one that operated in peacetime as well as wartime.
Call it whatever name you like, but let's set up a well-staffed independent agency to coordinate the information gathered, to undertake all secret work and such supplemental research as other government departments may request, and to analyze and disseminate continuously.
In 1947, Truman was finally persuaded. That year, he signed the National Security Act and the Central Intelligence Agency was established. But General William Donovan was out of the picture. Today, the Central Intelligence Agency is tied inextricably to the legacy of William Donovan and the OSS. Considered the father of the CIA, his portrait appears first in the gallery of directors.